I walked into the office after my 3-day regional meeting, feeling lighter than I had in months. The quarterly numbers were excellent, better than expected. Every deadline had been met, even the ones we thought might slip. I had even secured extra budget for team training, something we had been fighting for all year. For once, I allowed myself to believe things were finally moving in the right direction. But the moment I stepped off the elevator, something felt wrong. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was the silence. The usual Monday morning buzz phones ringing, keyboards clicking. Quiet conversations was gone. The entire floor felt hollow, like something important had been removed. If you're curious about what I discovered just a few minutes later, something that would completely change the future of my team, go ahead and hit the like button, because this story has a lot more to reveal. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now. It's amazing to connect with people from all around the world. Now, let's continue this journey together. I walked faster toward the East Wing where my team worked. 7 of the most capable engineers in the company. The people who had delivered 3 breakthrough projects back to back. Daniel, I called out, expecting his voice. Nothing. I turned the corner and stopped. Our workspace was empty, completely stripped. Desks cleared, monitors gone, chairs pushed aside. Even the small things, the plants, the notes, the personal touches had disappeared. Only faint dust outlines remained, marking where everything used to be. I spotted Martin from accounting passing by. "Hey, what happened to my team?" He hesitated, then said quietly, "You should check the basement. They moved them yesterday." "The basement," I repeated. "We don't even have offices down there." He didn't respond. The elevator ride down felt endless. When the doors opened, I walked past storage rooms until I found a door labeled Engineering Team B. Inside, my team sat between exposed pipes and cables, working on unstable tables. Water dripped into a bucket nearby. "What happened?" I asked. Maya looked up. "Mr. Calder moved us," she said. "We had 30 minutes. You know, this story is fictional, with the support of artificial intelligence to make it more engaging. But I truly believe you'll still feel real emotions and clearly see the meaningful lessons hidden within it. Now, let me continue the story." The smell of damp concrete clung to the air as I stood there, taking in the scene. No one needed to explain how bad it was. I could see it in their posture, in the way they avoided eye contact, in the quiet resignation that had replaced their usual energy. This wasn't just a relocation, it was a message. I stayed only a moment longer before turning back toward the door. "Keep working," I said calmly. "We'll talk later." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. As I stepped out, I could feel their eyes following me, searching for answers I didn't yet have. The walk back upstairs felt different this time. Slower, heavier. By the time the elevator doors opened onto the main floor, the silence no longer felt strange. It felt deliberate. I headed straight toward our old workspace in the East Wing. It didn't take long to see what had replaced us. Bright lighting, clean desks, open space, everything exactly as we had left it. Except now, it was occupied by a single person. A young man stood near the center desk, carefully arranging framed certificates in perfect alignment. He didn't look up as I approached. His movements were precise, almost rehearsed, as if he had imagined this moment many times before. Beside him stood Richard Calder, our department head. He had only been with the company for a few months, but his presence was already impossible to ignore. His posture straightened the moment he noticed me, his expression shifting into something overly enthusiastic. "Alice," he said, stepping forward. "Perfect timing." I didn't respond right away. My attention stayed on the man at the desk. "Meet Victor Hale," Calder continued, gesturing toward him. "Our new productivity transformation specialist." Victor finally turned, offering a brief nod, but his focus quickly returned to adjusting the angle of one of his certificates. There was no curiosity in his expression, no acknowledgement, as if I were just another piece of background noise. Calder lowered his voice slightly. though not enough to hide the pride in it. Victor has increased output by over 300% in his previous roles. His methods are revolutionary. Exactly what this department needs. I glanced around the room. The space that had once held 7 people was now dedicated to 1. And my team, I asked quietly. Calder waved a hand, as if it were a minor detail. Temporary adjustment. They can manage downstairs for now. We need to prioritize strategic transformation. Strategic, I repeated, letting the word settle. Victor finally spoke, his tone smooth and confident. Sometimes efficiency requires difficult decisions. Legacy systems, outdated workflows, they slow progress. I looked at him then. Really looked. There was something polished about him. Too polished. Like everything he said had been practiced in front of a mirror. Calder nodded eagerly. Exactly. Fresh perspective. That's what we've been missing. Fresh perspective. I thought about the years my team had spent solving problems no one else could. The nights they stayed late without being asked. The consistency no one celebrated because it had become expected. And you needed the entire space for that, I asked. Calder smiled. Innovation requires room to grow. The answer told me everything. I didn't argue, didn't raise my voice. There was no point, instead. I nodded once, slowly, and turned to leave. As I walked away, I heard Victor begin explaining something about optimization models and performance frameworks. His voice confident, polished, convincing. Calder listened like he was hearing the future, but I had already heard enough, because in that moment, I understood the truth. This wasn't about improving the department. It was about appearances. And someone had just decided that substance mattered less than the illusion of brilliance. I returned to the basement, but I didn't speak right away. Instead, I stood there for a moment, watching them, really watching them, not as a manager reviewing performance, not as someone responsible for results, but as someone who finally understood what was being overlooked. 7 people, 7 stories, 7 quiet forces that had carried an entire department without ever asking for recognition. Maya was the first person I had hired. Most companies had turned her away because she was too direct, too blunt in meetings, too unwilling to soften the truth. But I had seen something different. I had seen clarity when systems became too complex for anyone else to untangle. She saw patterns others missed. She didn't waste time on politics. She solved problems, and she did it better than anyone I had ever met. Ethan sat 2 desks away, his screen filled with lines of code that looked effortless to him but impossible to most. Fresh out of university when I found him, overlooked because he didn't come from a prestigious background, but he had something rare. He didn't just write solutions. He simplified them. Where others built complicated frameworks, he created elegance, quietly, consistently, without ever needing to prove himself. Then there was Victor Tran, our hardware specialist. He had been on the verge of retirement when I convinced him to stay. Decades of experience, knowledge that couldn't be replaced, instincts that no textbook could teach. He rarely spoke unless it mattered. But when he did, everyone listened, because he was almost always right. Lena handled testing. Though that title never truly captured what she did, she didn't just test systems. She predicted failure before it happened. Her protocols had prevented more disasters than anyone in upper management would ever know, if something could break. Lena had already imagined it. Arjun managed security. Calm, methodical, impossible to rush, while others focused on speed. He focused on stability. He built systems that didn't just work. They held under pressure. In a world that chased quick results, he built foundations that lasted. Noah was different. Quiet. Observant. Often underestimated because he didn't speak much in meetings. But he understood languages most people didn't. Not just programming languages, but systems, logic, communication between ideas. He translated complexity into clarity in ways no one else could. And then there was Claire, the bridge between everything. She could take the most technical concept and explain it to someone with no background at all. Clients trusted her instantly. Teams relied on her without realizing it. She made everything work together. For 8 years. This team had delivered results that others couldn't replicate. Not flashy results. Not the kind that came with dramatic presentations or bold promises, but real results. Consistent, reliable, measurable success. And yet none of that had been enough. 6 months ago, when Richard Calder joined as department head, I had sensed the shift immediately. He wasn't interested in what already worked. He was searching for something bigger, something louder, something that would impress executives who didn't understand the details. He wanted transformation, and Victor Hale had given him exactly that. Not substance, but the illusion of it. Polished language, impressive claims, numbers that sounded too good to question. What Calder never asked was why someone so transformative had moved between companies so quickly, why every success story came without context, why no one stayed long enough to verify the results. He didn't look deeper because he didn't want to, because believing in Victor was easier than understanding my team. I looked around the basement again, the exposed pipes, the dim lighting, the unstable desks. 7 people who had carried this company through its hardest challenges, now reduced to an afterthought. And still, they were working, no complaints, no resistance, just quiet determination. That was their strength, and their greatest weakness. Because people like Calder didn't notice consistency. They only noticed noise. I exhaled slowly, finally stepping forward. They looked up at me again, waiting, not just for instructions, but for something more. For a sign that what they had built still mattered, and in that moment, I made a decision, not out of anger, not out of pride, but out of clarity. If the company could not see their value, then I would make sure the world did. The next morning, nothing changed. The basement was still cold, the air still heavy with the faint smell of moisture and metal. The lighting flickered just enough to strain the eyes, and the steady drip from the pipe above had become part of the background noise, like a slow, constant reminder of where we were. But my team showed up on time, every single one of them. No complaints, no questions, just quiet focus. Maya was already reviewing system logs, her posture straight despite the uncomfortable chair beneath her. Ethan had his headphones on, fingers moving quickly across the keyboard. Completely absorbed, Victor Tran adjusted a piece of hardware with the same precision he always had, as if the environment around him didn't matter. Lena worked through testing protocols, methodical and calm. Arjun monitored security layers with unwavering concentration. Noah typed silently, his screen filled with structured logic only he fully understood. Claire moved between them, translating tasks, aligning efforts, keeping everything connected. If someone walked in without context, they might have thought this was just another normal workday. That was the strange part, because it wasn't normal, not even close. The temperature fluctuated throughout the day, sometimes too cold, sometimes suffocatingly warm. Twice before noon, we had to pause briefly to cover equipment when condensation from the pipes above began to drip more heavily. The Wi-Fi signal cut in and out, forcing Ethan to reroute connections manually. Even basic communication required more effort than it should have. And yet, the work continued. Deadlines were still met. Tasks were still completed. Systems still functioned exactly as expected. No one slowed down. I watched them carefully, noticing something most people would have missed. They weren't just working, they were adapting, quietly adjusting to every obstacle without making it visible. That kind of discipline couldn't be taught overnight. It was built over years. Around midday, Noah glanced up from his screen. "I don't understand something," he said softly. The others paused, listening. "Why are we documenting everything in such detail?" He continued. "It's more than usual." There was no frustration in his voice, just curiosity. Maya leaned back slightly, glancing in my direction. but didn't speak. They were waiting for me. I set my laptop down and looked at all of them before answering. Because everything we do matters. I said evenly. No matter where we are, it wasn't the full truth. Not yet. But it was enough. They exchanged brief looks, then returned to their work without another question. Trust didn't need explanations. By late afternoon, the rhythm of the room had stabilized. The dripping pipe, the hum of machines, the quiet typing, it all blended into something steady, predictable, almost normal. But beneath that surface, something had changed. I could feel it in the way they worked, more precise, more intentional, as if every action carried a weight it didn't have before. They weren't just completing tasks anymore. They were preserving something, their knowledge, their systems, their value, and they were doing it without being asked. That was when I knew they understood. At least in part. What was happening? Maybe not the full picture, but enough to follow without hesitation. As the day came to an end, no one rushed to leave. They stayed a little longer, finishing what needed to be done, closing loops, double-checking details, the kind of work that rarely gets noticed until it's gone. I gathered my things quietly, pausing before turning off the lights. 7 people, still working in a space they never should have been placed in, still delivering results that others would take credit for, and upstairs. Someone was probably talking about transformation and innovation. I didn't feel anger anymore, just certainty, because the gap between perception and reality had never been clearer. And when that gap becomes too wide, it doesn't stay hidden forever. 2 weeks passed in that basement, measured not by days but by quiet endurance. We adjusted to everything. The flickering lights, the unstable network, the constant dampness in the air. And still, the work never stopped. If anything, it became sharper, more intentional. Then, unexpectedly, everything seemed about to change. I received a call from the executive office late one afternoon. The CEO, Margaret Ellison, wanted me to present our team's performance and recent achievements at the upcoming board meeting, for the first time since the relocation. I saw something shift in my team. Hope. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was there. In the way Ethan sat up straighter, in the way Maya immediately began organizing data without being asked, in the quiet focus that filled the room as everyone contributed. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. This was what they had been waiting for, not recognition for ego, but validation that their work still mattered. That night, I stayed later than usual, reviewing slides under the dim basement lights. Every chart, every number, every detail was precise, not exaggerated, not polished for effect, just truth, because that was our strength. The morning of the presentation, I arrived early. I wore the same suit I reserved for the most important meetings, not because of appearances, but because it reminded me of who I was outside this basement as I made my way upstairs. Something felt different again. Not wrong this time, controlled. I reached the stairwell that connected to the executive floor. And that's where he was waiting, Richard Calder. He leaned casually against the railing, as if he had been expecting me. Change of plans, he said before I could speak. I stopped. What do you mean? He straightened, smoothing his jacket. The board wants to hear about future direction, not past performance, so Victor will be presenting instead. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. The CEO requested me specifically. I said calmly, I spoke with her this morning. Calder replied quickly. She agreed. It makes more sense strategically. Strategically. The word lingered in the air. I held his gaze, searching for any sign of hesitation. There was none. Only confidence. The kind that comes from believing you've already won. This isn't about strategy, I said quietly. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It's always about strategy, behind him. I could hear faint movement from the executive floor. People gathering, Conversations starting. The meeting was about to begin, and my team, I asked. They can continue their work downstairs, he said, as if it were an afterthought. We'll integrate them into Victor's framework later. Integrate, reduce, replace. He didn't say those words, but they were there. I could have argued. I could have pushed back, demanded clarity, insisted on speaking to the CEO directly. But I didn't, because in that moment, I understood something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was intentional. Calder wasn't just taking the presentation. He was rewriting the narrative, replacing years of consistent results with promises of something new, something louder, something easier to sell, and he believed no one would question it. I nodded once. Understood. His expression shifted slightly, as if he expected more resistance. But there was none. I turned and walked back down the stairs. Each step felt heavier, not because of disappointment, but because of clarity. When I pushed open the basement door, the room fell silent immediately. 7 faces looked up at me, searching for answers before I even spoke. Maya was the first to read it. Her shoulders dropped just slightly. What happened? Ethan asked. I placed my folder on the table, taking a moment before answering. They've changed the plan, I said. Victor is presenting instead. No one spoke. The silence this time was different. Not confusion, not even anger. Something quieter, more final. Ethan looked down at his screen, but I noticed the document open in front of him. A resignation letter, half written. So that's it, he said softly. We just let it happen. I looked at each of them, one by one. Not yet. I replied, my voice steady. They waited. Keep working, I added, and keep preparing everything. For what Claire asked, I met her eyes. You'll see. They didn't fully understand. I could see it in their expressions. But they nodded anyway, because despite everything, they still trusted me. And that trust was about to matter more than anything else. If you think Richard Calder was right to take my presentation and give it to Victor, comment agree. But if you believe that was a serious mistake, type big mistake. I'm curious, what would you choose sometimes? One simple choice reveals everything about a person. The board meeting ended without us. We stayed in the basement, working as usual, while everything unfolded somewhere above us. Behind closed doors, we were no longer allowed to enter. No one asked for updates. No one needed to. By mid-afternoon, the first signs began to surface. It started quietly. A message passed between departments. A conversation cut short when someone noticed us listening. The kind of subtle tension that spreads before anyone confirms the truth. Then Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, frowned slightly, then looked up. That was Kevin from Data Analytics. He said, he just left the executive floor. And Maya asked. Ethan hesitated. He said, it didn't go well. The room went still. No one spoke, but I could feel their attention sharpen. What do you mean, not well? Claire asked carefully. Ethan exhaled. Victor started strong. Lots of big claims, charts, projections, all that. But when the board started asking technical questions, he paused. He couldn't answer them. Maya leaned forward slightly. Couldn't answer, or avoided answering both. Ethan replied. At first he tried to redirect. Then he started speaking in circles. Eventually, it was obvious he didn't understand the systems he was talking about. Silence settled over the room again. I wasn't surprised. Not really. But hearing it confirmed changed something. Lena spoke next. Her voice calm but precise. What kind of questions? Integration issues? Scalability? Security risks? Ethan said. Basic things. Things we deal with every day. Arjun shook his head slowly, and he didn't know Ethan gave a small, almost disbelieving smile. Apparently not. For a moment. No one moved. Then Victor Tran let out a quiet breath. 300% improvement, he murmured, based on what no one answered him. Because the answer was obvious now. Not data, not experience, just words. More details filtered in as the afternoon went on. Someone from operations mentioned that the board had pressed harder as the presentation continued. Another employee said that one of the directors had asked Victor to explain how his model would function under real system constraints. He couldn't. At some point, Richard Calder had stepped in, trying to recover the situation, promising that the existing engineering team would support the implementation, that any gaps in understanding would be addressed internally. That part made me pause, because even in failure, he was still trying to use my team as a safety net, as if we were something he could rely on without ever acknowledging. By the end of the day, the atmosphere in the building had shifted, not dramatically, not openly, but noticeably. The confidence that had surrounded Victor that morning was gone, replaced by something quieter. Doubt. And doubt, once introduced, doesn't disappear easily. Maya leaned back in her chair, folding her arms. "So what happens now?" she asked. No one had an answer, because for the first time since all of this began, the narrative had cracked. Not completely, but enough. I closed my laptop slowly, letting the silence settle. "This," I said, my voice calm, "is just the beginning." They looked at me, some with confusion, some with cautious understanding. They still didn't see the full picture, but they didn't need to. Not yet. Because what happened in that boardroom didn't just expose Victor. It exposed something much bigger. And once the truth starts to surface, it has a way of continuing. That evening, after most of the building had emptied, I stayed behind in the basement a little longer than usual. Not because there was more work to do, but because I needed the quiet. The kind of quiet where thoughts could finally settle into something clear. My phone rested on the table in front of me. I stared at it for a moment before unlocking the screen. There was a name I hadn't contacted in a long time, Sophia Reyes. We had worked together years ago, long before I joined this company, back when projects were unpredictable and resources were limited. When success depended on people more than systems, she had always been sharp, direct, and most importantly, honest. The kind of person who saw value quickly and acted on it without hesitation. I hesitated for only a second before pressing call. She answered on the third ring. "Alice." Her voice carried both surprise and recognition. "It's been a while." "It has," I replied. "Are you busy, for you never?" "What's going on?" I glanced around the basement. The dim lights, the exposed pipes, the quiet determination that had filled this space for weeks. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Hypothetically," she laughed softly. "Hypothetical situations are usually very real situations. Go ahead. If you had a full engineering team," I continued carefully, "proven, consistent, highly specialized, but completely undervalued where they are, what would you do?" There was a brief pause on the line. "I'd ask why they're still there," she said simply. I allowed myself a small smile. "That's a fair question, and I'd also ask," she added, her tone shifting slightly, "why you're calling me about it." I didn't answer immediately, because she already knew. "You're serious," she said. "Not a question, a statement." "Yes." Another pause. "Longer this time. Tell me about them," Sophia said. So I did. I told her about Maya's ability to untangle impossible systems, about Ethan's instinct for elegant solutions, about Victor Tran's decades of experience, about Lena's precision, Arjun's stability, Noah's quiet brilliance, and Claire's ability to connect everything together. I didn't exaggerate. I didn't need to. When I finished, the silence on the other end felt different, focused. "Can you get them out?" she asked. "Yes," I said. How soon I looked at the clock on the wall, then back at my team, still working, unaware of the conversation unfolding. "Very soon." Sophia exhaled slowly. "Then I'll be direct. I'm building a new engineering division. We've been looking for the right core team, not just individuals, but a unit that already works. What you're describing. She paused. That's rare. I said nothing. We can offer them double their current salaries, she continued. Full autonomy, proper resources, and a workspace that actually reflects their value. The words settled heavily in the air, not because of the numbers, but because of what they represented. Recognition, not just jobs. She added, a foundation. They won't just be joining a team. They'll be building one. I leaned back slightly, absorbing it. And me? I asked. You already know the answer to that. She said, you lead them, or you don't bring them at all. I looked at my team again. 7 people who had given everything to a place that no longer saw them. I'll need details. I said, you'll have them tonight. She replied, contracts, terms, everything. But Alice? Her voice softened slightly. Once you make this move, there's no going back. I understood that, more than she realized. I know, I said, when the call ended. I didn't move for a moment. Then I stood, picking up my laptop. The plan that had been forming quietly in the background was no longer just an idea. It was real, and for the first time since all of this began. I felt something shift, not uncertainty, not frustration, control. I walked back toward my team, my expression steady. They looked up, sensing something had changed. I didn't say anything yet, because timing mattered, and the right moment was getting closer. 2 days later, I made my move. I didn't announce anything to my team, not yet. Instead, I asked them to continue exactly as they had been. Focused, precise, professional, nothing out of the ordinary, on the surface. Everything remained unchanged. But timing is everything, that morning. I invited Sophia Reyes to visit the office, officially. It was just a casual tour, unofficially. It was something else entirely. I knew Richard Calder's schedule. I knew when he would be on the executive floor. And more importantly, when he would be showcasing Victor Hale to potential clients. By mid-morning, everything aligned. As I walked through the upper floors with Sophia beside me, I kept the conversation light, pointing out departments, explaining workflows, giving her just enough context to understand the environment. But I was watching the time carefully, right on schedule. We reached the conference area. Calder's voice carried through the glass walls before we even stepped inside. Confident, animated, selling. This system will redefine productivity standards across the entire organization, he was saying. Perfect. He noticed me immediately. Alice, he called out, his tone overly welcoming. Great timing. I smiled politely. I thought I'd introduce a colleague. This is Sophia Reyes. Calder's attention shifted instantly. He stepped forward, eager, of course, always glad to meet industry leaders. Victor turned as well, adjusting his posture slightly, his expression returning to that polished confidence I had seen before. Sophia nodded, composed, observant. Calder gestured toward Victor. This is Victor Hale, our productivity transformation specialist. He's been implementing a groundbreaking system that's already showing incredible potential. Victor stepped in smoothly. We're introducing a framework that optimizes output by eliminating inefficiencies at every level, he said. In previous companies, I've increased productivity by over 300%. Sophia listened without interruption. No reaction, just quiet attention, when he finished. She tilted her head slightly. That's impressive, she said calmly. Which companies did you implement this in? Victor smiled. Confident, Northbridge Technologies, Arc Nova Systems, and Northbridge, she interrupted gently. Yes, he replied without hesitation. That was one of our most successful cases. Sophia's expression didn't change. That's interesting, she said. The room grew quieter. Because I sit on the advisory board of Northbridge Technologies, she continued, her voice steady. And I don't recall any productivity increase during your time there. Victor's smile faltered. Just for a second. Calder stepped in quickly. There may be some internal data, numbers, Sophia said. Still calm. I reviewed their performance reports personally. In fact, the quarter you're referring to showed delays across multiple projects. The silence that followed was immediate and heavy. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it again. Calder's expression tightened, the confidence slipping just slightly. There must be some misunderstanding, he said. I stepped forward then, breaking the tension. There isn't, I said quietly. All eyes turned to me. I accepted an offer from Sophia yesterday. I continued. I'll be joining her company next week. The shift in the room was instant. Calder stared at me. What, I'm not going alone? I added. My entire team is coming with me. Victor's composure disappeared completely. That's not possible, Calder said sharply. You can't just take an entire team. That's unethical. It's legal, I replied. You can check our contracts. No restrictions. Sophia remained silent, letting the moment unfold. Calder's face flushed. You're overreacting. We can fix this. The basement situation was temporary. I held his gaze. You didn't just move us, I said. You replaced us. The words landed harder than anything else. Around us. The clients who had been listening began to shift uncomfortably. The polished presentation had lost its control. Calder looked at them, then back at me, his confidence unraveling. We can discuss this privately, he said quickly. There's nothing to discuss, I replied. I turned slightly toward Sophia. We should go. She nodded once as we walked out. The room remained silent behind us. But the damage had already been done, not because I raised my voice, not because I argued, but because the truth had been revealed at exactly the right moment. And once people see the truth clearly, it's impossible to pretend they didn't. When I returned to the basement, the atmosphere felt different, not tense, not uncertain, just quiet, like something important had already shifted. Even before I spoke, 7 pairs of eyes turned toward me the moment I stepped inside. Maya was the first to stand. What happened? I closed the door behind me, letting the sound settle before answering. For a brief moment, I looked at each of them, taking in their faces, the same people who had endured everything without complaint. It's done, I said calmly. No one moved. I've accepted an offer. I continued. And I'm not going alone. That was all it took. Ethan leaned forward, his expression sharp. You mean, all of us? Yes. The silence that followed was heavy, but not with doubt, with realization. Maya exhaled slowly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. We're a new engineering division, I said, led by Sophia Reyes. Better resources, proper working conditions, and compensation that reflects your actual value. Victor Tran let out a quiet breath, almost like he had been holding it for years. And they want the whole team. They insisted on it. Claire looked around at everyone, then back at me. When next week? For a second. No one reacted. Then Ethan let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You're serious? I am. The room changed instantly. Not loud, not chaotic, but alive. Lena's eyes softened, the tension she had carried quietly beginning to fade. Arjun nodded once, thoughtful but certain. Noah looked down at his screen, then slowly closed the file he had been working on. As if acknowledging a chapter ending, Maya crossed her arms. Studying me and the contracts, already in progress. I replied, You'll each receive them soon. Everything is transparent, no hidden terms. Victor Tran gave a small, approving nod. That's how it should be? For the first time since the relocation, I saw something return to them, not just hope, confidence, but it didn't turn into celebration, not immediately, because this team understood something most people didn't. Leaving wasn't just about walking away, it was about how you leave. What about our current projects? Lena asked quietly. I nodded, expecting the question. We finished them. Ethan frowned slightly. After everything they've done? Yes, I said firmly. We don't leave chaos behind. We leave clarity. Claire smiled faintly. That sounds like you? It's not about them. I continued. It's about us, our reputation, our standards. Maya watched me for a moment, then nodded. All right, that was all it took. Agreement didn't need debate. It needed trust. For the rest of the day, the room shifted into a new rhythm. Every task became intentional. Every detail mattered. Documentation was updated. Systems were organized. Processes were clarified. Not because anyone asked them to, because they chose to. Ethan rewrote sections of code to make them easier to understand. Lena finalized testing protocols with extra notes. Arjun double-checked security layers. Noah refined system logic so anyone stepping in could follow it. Claire began preparing summaries that translated everything into clear language. They weren't just finishing work, they were protecting it. Victor Tran stood back at one point, watching the team move with quiet precision. You know, he said, most teams fall apart when they're leaving. Maya didn't look up from her screen. We're not most teams. No one argued with that. As the evening approached, no one rushed to pack their personal things. Not yet, because this wasn't about escape. It was about transition. I stood near the door, watching them one last time before speaking. We have 1 week. I said, we do this properly. 7 heads nodded in quiet agreement. Not because they had to, but because they believed in it, and in that moment. I realized something important. This wasn't just a team anymore. It was something stronger, something that couldn't be replaced, no matter who tried. The shift in the building became impossible to ignore the next morning. Word had spread faster than I expected. Conversations stopped when we passed by. People glanced at us with a mix of curiosity and disbelief. By midday, the inevitable happened. Richard Calder came down to the basement. He didn't belong there. That much was obvious the moment he stepped inside. His polished shoes hesitated slightly on the concrete floor, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. His expression caught somewhere between control and urgency. Alice, he said, forcing a calm tone. Can we talk? I didn't move from where I stood. You can talk here. My team remained at their desks, but I could feel their attention shift. No one spoke. No one needed to. Calder adjusted his jacket, clearly uncomfortable. This doesn't concern everyone. It does, I replied. We don't keep secrets. A brief silence followed. Then he exhaled, giving up on the pretense. I've spoken with senior leadership, he began. We're prepared to make adjustments. Adjustments. Maya repeated quietly from her desk. Calder ignored her. We're offering your entire team a 15% salary increase, effective immediately. No one reacted. He continued quickly. We're also expediting the renovation of the East Wing. You'll be moved back upstairs within days. Proper workspaces, better resources, everything you need. Still nothing. The silence in the room felt heavier than any argument could have been. I stepped forward slightly. And Victor, Calder hesitated for just a fraction of a second. We're evaluating his role. Evaluating. The word hung in the air, empty and convenient. You didn't evaluate it before, I said calmly. His jaw tightened. We made decisions based on the information we had at the time. And now we're correcting course, he replied quickly. That's what matters. I watched him closely. For the first time since all of this began. The confidence was gone. In its place was something else. Pressure. You're losing control, I said quietly. His expression flickered. This isn't about control. It is, I replied. You chose someone who looked impressive over people who actually delivered results. Now the consequences are catching up. That's not fair, he snapped. I was trying to move this department forward. At whose expense, Maya asked. Finally looking up. Calder didn't answer her. He turned back to me. Look, whatever issues we've had, we can fix this. You don't need to leave. I held his gaze. We've already signed. The words landed harder than I expected. For a moment, he just stared at me. Contracts can be renegotiated, he said, his voice tightening. I can match their offer. You can't, Ethan said quietly from behind me. Calder looked at him sharply. Excuse me, not really, Ethan continued, his tone calm, because it's not just about money. That stopped him. Claire added softly, it's about respect. Arjun nodded once. And trust. Victor Tran leaned back in his chair. Things you can't fix in a few days? The room fell silent again. Calder looked from one face to another, as if trying to find someone who would agree with him. There was no one. He turned back to me, his voice lower now. Alice, this is going to destroy my position. For a brief moment, something almost human crossed his expression. Almost. The basement wasn't a mistake. I said evenly, it was a decision. I admit that. He said quickly. I made the wrong call, and now you want to undo it because it affects you. I replied. He didn't deny it. That was the most honest thing he had done so far. I'm asking you to reconsider. He said, whatever it takes. I looked at him for a long moment before answering. It's too late. The words were quiet, but final. Something in his posture collapsed slightly, the last bit of confidence slipping away. He stood there for a second longer, as if expecting something to change. Nothing did. Then he turned and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a dull, echoing sound. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Ethan let out a slow breath. 15%. He muttered. Maya shook her head slightly. Too late. I didn't say anything. Because this was never about negotiation. It was about consequences. And some decisions. You don't get to take back. That evening, just as we were preparing to leave, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name I hadn't expected. Margaret Ellison. I stepped outside into the quiet hallway before answering. Alice speaking. Alice. Her voice was calm, measured. I've just been briefed on the situation. Is it true your entire team is planning to leave? Yes, I replied. No hesitation. There was a pause on the other end. Longer than usual. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. My office. I'll be there, I said. Then ended the call. When I returned to the basement, 7 pairs of eyes were already on me. The CEO, Maya asked. Yes. What does she want? Ethan followed. A meeting, I said, just me. The room fell quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was alert. They're going to try to stop us, Claire said softly. Maybe, I replied. Or maybe they're trying to understand what they've already lost. The next morning, I arrived early. Margaret's office sat at the top floor, surrounded by glass walls that overlooked the entire city. It was the opposite of the basement in every possible way. Bright, open, controlled. She was already there when I entered, reviewing a set of documents. She looked up, studying me briefly before gesturing to the chair across from her. Thank you for coming, she said. Of course. She leaned back slightly. I've spent the last 12 hours reviewing your team's performance history. Impressive, consistent, undervalued. I didn't respond. And now you're leaving, she continued. All of you. That's not a coincidence. No, I said. Explain it to me. She said, it's not about the basement. I replied, it's about what the basement represents. Her expression shifted slightly. Go on. It represents how decisions are made. I continued. Flash over substance. Promises over results. My team wasn't moved because we failed. We were moved because we weren't loud enough. She studied me carefully, then nodded once. That's a fair assessment, she said. There was no defensiveness, no denial. Instead, She reached for a folder and slid it across the desk toward me. "This is what I'm prepared to offer," she said. I opened it. The terms were unexpected. Higher compensation than Sophia's offer, direct reporting line to her, full autonomy, a completely new division built around my team, with proper resources and authority, everything we had deserved from the beginning. I looked up at her. "Why now? Because the situation has changed," she replied simply. "And because losing your team would be a mistake this company cannot afford." I closed the folder slowly. For the first time since all of this began, the decision wasn't clear anymore, because this wasn't just an offer, it was a recognition, and that made it far more complicated than before. When I returned to the basement, my team could immediately tell something had changed. I didn't speak right away. I placed the folder on the table and looked at them. One by one, she made an offer. I said finally. Maya stepped closer. Better than Sophia's yes. The room went silent. I explained everything. The autonomy, the resources, the recognition. A new division built around us. Ethan frowned slightly. "So, we stay?" "No," I said calmly. "Not exactly." They waited. "We split," I continued. "Part of the team goes with Sophia. The rest stays here under new leadership. We stay connected. We collaborate. We make sure no one ever has full control over us again, for a moment." No one reacted. Then Victor Tran nodded slowly. "That's strategic." Claire smiled faintly. "We become our own leverage." Maya looked at me, then exhaled. "I like it." One by one. They agreed. Not because it was easy, but because it was right. Within days. Everything moved quickly. Contracts signed, roles defined, a new structure built across two companies. Calder was removed. Victor disappeared just as quietly as he arrived, 6 months later. Both teams were thriving, different locations, same core values. And for the first time, we weren't just part of a system, we were shaping it. If you would also split the team between two companies to protect your value and create long-term leverage. Type agree, so I know I made the right decision. If you would choose to walk away completely without looking back, type leave. And if you're still thinking about it, type maybe. I'd also love to hear your story. Feel free to share it, looking back at everything that happened. I realized this wasn't just a story about a team being pushed aside. It was a turning point that reshaped how I see value, leadership, and self-respect. What seemed like a setback became the clearest lesson I could have ever received. The first lesson I learned is that true value doesn't disappear just because others fail to recognize it. My team didn't suddenly become less capable when we were moved to the basement. The environment changed, but our worth did not. The second lesson is that silence and consistency are powerful, but they must be supported by visibility. For years, we delivered results quietly, but in a world that often rewards noise. You must also learn how to make your impact seen. Third, I realized that leadership is not about control, it's about protection and direction. My responsibility was never just to manage tasks, but to protect my team's future, even if that meant making difficult decisions. Fourth, I learned that respect cannot be negotiated at the last minute, when it's missing for too long. No offer, no matter how attractive, can truly fix it. And finally, the most important lesson, sometimes the best way to win is not to fight the system, but to redesign it by creating our own path. We didn't just escape a bad situation, we built something better. Now, I'm curious, what about you? What lessons stood out the most to you? Or have you ever experienced something similar in your own life? Share it in the comments. I'd truly love to read your story. If this journey resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. You're not just watching, you're part of a community that values growth, courage, and meaningful change.
Welcome to Boardroom Revenge Stories, a channel focused on workplace conflict, corporate betrayal, power struggles, and quiet justice. Our stories follow a structured workflow to deliver a consistent, immersive experience. We start by analyzing real discussions on Reddit, Facebook, Quora, and blogs. Next, we craft original scripts using AI tools like ChatGPT. We then use 11 Labs to transform text into high-quality voice and edit everything in CapCut for a smooth, cinematic finish. Thumbnails are designed with Canva, and every video is carefully reviewed before release. These stories go beyond entertainment, revealing how power truly works and how justice quietly unfolds.